Michael Keefe, representing Coyote Mountain Dojo in Crestone, and he is going to be talking to us about what to do with our poo-poo. How fun is that? I love it. Michael and his wife Lydia steward 42 acres on the border of the Great Sand Dunes National Park, where they created a 1-acre garden and orchard using regionally specific permaculture techniques. They believe in the resilience of the living earth and seek to deeply learn and practice those ways that restore connection, sanity, and wholeness. So thank you so much. And I just want to also remind everybody, if you find yourself wanting to take notes, we have notebooks and pens for sale in the back. They are for sale. So come and talk to me if you are interested in one of those. And if you have any questions, please wait for me to come to you with the mic so that we can capture them in the recording. Thank you so much. Michael, it's all you.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Thanks, Caitlin and Jay and everyone at the Seed Exchange for putting this on. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Really been excited to share this talk with you all. What to do with your poo-poo. Lydia and I at our home have been practicing this particular humanure technique for the last 5 or 6 years with great success. My goal today is to not only to share with you the technique that we're using, but also to explain why our current solutions for what to do with our human excrement is not necessarily actually working. So we're going to kind of dive in to a little bit of the history and the current state of things, and then potential solutions. I also want to say that this is that what I'm about to present is not the only option. There's a lot of different techniques that are out there, and I'll just get right into it. Let's see if I get to go. Yeah. Okay, so everything that I'm going to be talking to you about today is mostly based off of this book, The Humanure Handbook by Joseph Jenkins. It's an amazing book, and even if you're not considering pursuing humanure, I still think it should be on the bookshelf of anyone who is considering themselves a functioning member of humanity. I think it's worth a read because it's very educational. Originally written in 1994, it's in its 4th edition. One thing that I love about this book, he mentions at a certain point that if at any point someone is trying to use humanure as a system for themselves and they're running against municipal issues with their local governments, that you can write to him and he'll send a copy of the book for free to the local administrator that you're having problems with. So he really stands behind his work, and I've found it to be very approachable. And so, yeah. Okay, so I really appreciate that the topic of the seed exchange this year is sand to soil. I think that humanure fits the bill for being a common sense solution for a lot of the main issues that we're dealing with in this valley and all over the world. Of course, we do have this giant aquifer of water under our feet, but generally speaking, I think it's really important that we consider fresh water to be a precious resource, and it certainly is considered that way in many parts of the world. And so, our flush toilets are, at least a gallon of fresh water per flush. And you think about, this particular chart estimates fresh water consumption per person at being around 70 gallons per day, with the vast majority of that being flush toilets. So I really appreciate this meme because it really just, goes to there's a lot of people out there that don't have access to fresh water. So it's, if we think about toilets, flush toilets, I don't consider them to really be a permanent solution for humanity, because if it's not something that works for everybody, then is it really the solution that we're looking for? And also, are flush toilets even working the way that we think that they are? Oh yeah, and then I also just and then also just the idea of like what how are we defining success in the idea of waste management, and I'll show further on that basically what we're trying to deal with in human excrement is pathogen elimination, and also we have this a larger problem that's been within the last 100 years or less even of pharmaceutical contamination and chemical contamination in our wastewater streams. So are our current systems even doing the job that we suppose that they are doing? And if not, are there other solutions? So that's where we're going into. So flush toilets have provided some solution for humanity, right? This is a scene, this is a scene that was very common in our world as modernization, greater populations collecting in cities especially really start. We haven't really known what to do with our poop. And for the longest time, of course, there's open defecation, but then as population started to increase in localized areas, then we started to have more and more problems, but we didn't exactly know about, we didn't have the understanding of microbiology, we didn't have the understanding of viruses and pathogens. Those understandings came later with different scientific, inventions such as the microscope. So, this is a very real situation that was happening. And so flush toilets obviously created a situation where we were able to move our excrement out of the cities, away from the population, and that solved a lot of problems. So I'm not fully against flush toilets, but I'm proposing that perhaps we need to take another step. And in fact, I think that as humanity collectively, we are still growing up. We're actually still children on this planet in a lot of ways. We're still learning how to interact and live in a way that is going to be sustainable for us long term. And we're running into these problems left and right with how we're operating on the planet, and finding out one way or another that this action or that action isn't actually sustainable. And we're finding out more and more that that's true, especially with our municipalities and waste excrement issues, because we are pooping in our fresh water, which is a scarce resource. Okay, so I want to go into the basics of the main ways in which we're currently dealing with our excrement. So in the valley, this is very applicable. Septic systems. Are septic systems really doing the job that we are assuming that they are? Are they all that they're cracked up to be? And I would argue, and there's a lot of science to support, that they aren't actually doing the job that we think that they are. Septic systems are relying on anaerobic digestion, but they aren't necessarily doing that job properly. Mostly their job is to separate liquids from solids in the tank itself, which then needs to get pumped out, right? And we'll talk about that later. But then also we have the leach field, which they now call the soil treatment area. And supposedly there is an effect of, like, as the effluent travels out of the tank and into the leach field and drains down into the soil, there's supposedly the development of a biofilm that's supposed to, and then there's filtration that's happening, and the pathogens are supposed to be neutralized or collected in that one area. The solids are then pumped out, or ought to be, and if they're not, that can cause a problem. So there's a lot of issues with septic systems that if they're not being maintained properly, they're more prone to contamination of the local soil. And we can tell that septic systems aren't working the way that we hope that they are, because it's commonly known that in areas with large concentrations of septic systems in one area, the groundwater is frequently found to be contaminated. I have a neighbor not just a couple miles from my home, and they unfortunately recently found out. They just moved in, they bought the home kind of in a rush, and they found out that after they moved in that they were like, the water smells kind of sewagey, we don't know why. And they realized that their well only went 40 feet deep. And I'm sure, as many of us SLV residents know, the first layer of our aquifer is actually contaminated already. It's contaminated with petro fertilizer chemicals, but it's also largely contaminated by septic systems, which don't actually they're not really working. They do solve some problems, right? So there are issues with black water, black water being not only water that's been mixed with poop and pee, but also chemicals that people are flushing or putting down the drain. Not everyone's responsible with what they put down their drains. And septic systems aren't designed to handle these things. And then another big issue that we're going to be talking about later is pharmaceuticals. So septic systems aren't handling pharmaceuticals at all. All that stuff is going into our aquifers, and we're finding it in the groundwater. Okay, wastewater treatment plants. So wastewater treatment plants are a little bit better. It's like a septic system on steroids. They have more technology at their disposal. There's different approaches that wastewater treatment systems take to treating their water. It's pretty wild because 99% of the water, 99% of the material that comes into wastewater treatment plants is water. And so they're charged with the task of cleaning and making suitable a large volume of water to return to the aquifer. Wastewater treatment plants are charged with testing the output of their facility to make sure that there's certain markers that aren't going above certain levels before the water returns to the environment. And but again, they aren't able to deal. They have no ability to deal with things like pharmaceuticals and all the chemicals get washed into the water supply as well. Another issue with wastewater treatment systems is they still have biosolids that they have to deal with. So they're separating out the solids. And there's this great story from a few years ago. So New York City has I forget the number, but it's like an insane amount of biosolids every day that they train out of the city. And a large amount of the biosolids in the country are actually recycled into farmland in the Midwest. And this train in particular in this photo got, for some reason, logistical reason or something, got stuck in this small town in Alabama, and the whole town just stunk up for weeks and weeks, and it became this whole story. And so the the biosolids are a real issue in and of themselves, because the wastewater treatment facilities, they don't have the ability to fully batch process these materials. So a lot of the things that we would need to do to really make these pathogen-free, pesticide-free, pharmaceutical-free, safe to use, that requires a lot of time and energy that they just don't have, and space that they just don't have the ability to handle. So a lot of this material just goes and gets sown back into the farmland, and those crops that are being grown are showing signs of pathogen contamination, and all sorts of issues with hormones and pharmaceuticals. And so this is a real issue. I was working with a woman who worked for the Colorado State Extension in the San Luis Valley, Madeline, really great person. So Wilson, thank you, who's done a lot of great work in the Valley. And she told me that the Alamosa wastewater treatment facility has been looking closely at this issue. Of course, it's a really real issue, especially for us here in the valley, because we, whatever goes back into the soil here, we're all living in it, and so they were looking at this issue, and they came to the conclusion that the only acceptable way to actually process their solids was to put it through a composting process. So compost actually they found that the only way they could actually solve the problems that they were dealing with was compost. So they're also looking at that as a solution. It's also important to note that the other 50% that isn't sown back into the farmland is put into landfill. So this is, like I said, we've solved some problems with sanitation. We've prevented a lot of disease and epidemics by flushing our shit somewhere else. But I would argue that we're also just sending the problem somewhere else and not really dealing with it. And so what I think is really important, and what I hope that we can come together around in this presentation, is that we need to find a solution that really I don't know, I feel like it makes us more mature as a species to really figure this out for real. And it's just not working, even though it feels like it maybe is, because you go to the bathroom, flush it, and it goes away, and the problem is not in your hands anymore, right? And I just want to acknowledge that it's difficult for us to look at our shit, right? Both physically and spiritually, right? I feel like this actually has this this meta thing where it's we actually have to look at what we're doing to the planet. And so I think a large part of this is is about just being real and honest about what we're doing. Okay, so I find this super interesting. So the recycling of human manure has actually been practiced for thousands of years in Asia, in different countries in Asia. In China, the recycling of human waste into farmland was termed night soil. Lydia and I host woofers at our land to help in our garden. And a couple of years ago, we had a woman who grew up in China. And when I'm always teaching people about human manure when they come to our home, and I was giving her this talk basically, and I got to this point, and she said, "Oh, I know all about that. The school that I grew up in, her kindergarten, they were pooping and putting it into their garden, and they were growing food for the children that were, at the school." And she did say, she was like, "Yeah, we got sick, we did get sick. That's part of the reason why in Asian cultures there's not a lot of raw vegetable consumption. They're very particular about cooking everything, right? Now it's not exactly the correct solution, but they were on the right track, right? And satellite imagery of major population centers in China, you'll see healthy green belts around these cities, and it's because they're still utilizing this. So it's, even though there's issues with pathogens, there's still benefit that's happening. Right, and then of course there's pit latrines. This great illustration shows why this isn't necessarily a solution. I want to take a second to talk about Saguache County. Saguache County used to issue permits for composting toilets. They don't anymore. When I moved into my home on 40 acres in the Grants, the house had always had a composting toilet, and somehow we were flagged by the county, and I got a letter in the mail with basically a cease and desist, and they threatened to evict me from my home, me and my family, evict us from our home for practicing a compost toilet situation. Now, I fought back, tried to prove that we were grandfathered in from before, but I couldn't find any documentation that we had ever been issued a permit. It was a really scary time for us. And ultimately, we ended up installing a septic system to make the county happy. And then we installed a septic system and got it got it installed and checked off. And then I put my compost toilet right on the spot where the toilet would go. Anyone from the county is here. But there's real reasons why the county started cracking down. This was like 3 or 4 years ago. During my conversations with land use about this situation, and Tom McCracken, even I had conversations with him about it. He mentioned there were issues with residents, particularly in the KV, that were really not doing good practices. There was issues with people delivering full buckets of human waste to the landfill, and they were running over the buckets with their machinery and stuff. So like, I can see why they weren't too stoked. But I'd like to my hope is to educate everyone to the point where we start to feel a little bit more comfortable with re-investigating this situation. This doesn't work, but there is a system that does work, so that's where we're going to need to. Yeah, I'm going to grab my water. Yeah, can you? Yeah.
I want to mention real quick that the county requires you to put in a septic system, and then they allow you to compost. Like it's you can have a composting toilet once you have a septic system in. So there is that weird thing, yeah, about it.
Yep, and I get into that more. There are some still good reasons for that. It's a hard thing to legislate because there's still issues with the water coming out of the house. So my house, because it didn't have a septic system prior, all the water, including water from the washing machine, dishwasher, kitchen sink, all of that was gray water back into the land, and some issues with evaporation, right? And the water board is really particular. They want the water back in the aquifer. So part of the benefit of septic systems there is that the water doesn't disappear; it stays in the aquifer. Okay, so night soil, that was a thing. It's still a thing, but we didn't fully understand that, or we're still. Yeah, there just wasn't the understanding of the pathogen issue so much there. So early 1900s, compost starts to become a thing in the modern sense that we know of it today. And I really want to drive this point home that compost is a technology. I think it's something we take for granted as this natural thing that happens on its own. We put stuff out in the box in the backyard and turns into soil, but actually that's kind of magic, right? That's something that we developed as a species, and just because it's a technology that is based on biological activity that's happening invisibly to us doesn't mean that it's not a technology. I think this is a great image here of the nutrient cycle. So, the beauty of human manure is that we actually get to reutilize all this material that's coming in. So I just want to just give you an example, something I think about pretty frequently at my house is, we're taking in food from the grocery store, and I'm eating that food. I'm getting nutrients out of it. And then I'm pooping it out, and then I'm putting it in my pile. And it is eventually going to become the food that I eat again. So I'm bringing nutrients in from outside, storing it in my system to be reused later. And then any food scraps that I don't eat, they go to my chickens. But then their poop goes into the human manure pile also, and that gets recycled. And also the chickens themselves, they go into the human manure pile after they've died, and I'll get into that later. So it's this really beautiful generative cycle that we're missing out on right now as a species. Yeah. Okay. So back to the county for a second. I had conversations with different members of the administration, the county, and they often in the discussions around compost toilets, these come up a lot. And when I first moved into my house, we had the toilet on the right. It's called a Sunmar. This toilet is like this tall. You had to like stand up on a stool just to get on it. And a lot of these systems have some sort of a rotating drum inside to like turn the pile, you know. And then another key feature of these that they promote is that they are, separating the solids from the liquids. So that's actually a big mistake. That's a big mistake, and I didn't really know actually. And I want to credit life because the whole situation that I went through with the county, almost being evicted from my own home for this, actually inspired me to really figure out, like, I was like, oh, okay, because I was using this system. I just moved into this house and we were all of a sudden doing composting toilets. So I didn't really know, I wasn't educated. And then when this thing happened with the county, I decided to become educated. And that's when I just learned how much I was doing wrong and how much these are such a pain in the butt. And they're so bad to clean. They're so disgusting. It was like this terrible job that somebody had to do every once in a while because like inevitably there'd be these little crevices that you couldn't clean, and then flies would get into the thing, and every few months I'd have a bloom of flies in my house. It was crazy. And then I'd have to take the whole thing out and wash it with hot water piece by piece and reassemble it. It was just insane. I was like, this is composting. Okay. And so, so thank the Lord for this book, because Joseph Jenkins really lays it out in such a way that it's super digestible. And I want to say again that there's other ways of doing this, and I'm just talking about one way, but there's other ways of doing it. I know that Jeff has a good bit of information about there's bokashi methods, there's these other anaerobic styles of doing this. This is an aerobic system I'm going to be getting into, but anyway, I just had to say these don't work. And there's the companies never talk about what you're supposed to do with it afterwards. Right, yeah, and I could go into that too. There's all these. There's also issues with just straight urine going. I know it's like a popular thing to like pee in your garden. It's good for the plants, but actually, there's actually issues. There's pathogens and things in your pee potentially as well. So it's actually good for all of it to be collected as one. Oh yeah, and the water. Okay, so having the solids and the liquids combined is a good thing because. Especially in a dry climate like ours, the water is the liquid content of our urine is important to keep the pile moist. I have it in a later slide. Bacteria do not walk; they swim. So the pile is not going to do its thing if it's not wet. So it's like free water to really activate the whole thing. Okay, so what do we do? So let me just check this. Okay, yeah, right. So I'm in this portion of the presentation. It's going to get really personal. I'm going to show you my own system. You're going to see my toilet, which I cleaned before I took pictures of it, and we're gonna, we're just gonna get into how what this system really looks like in reality. So this is my toilet. It's a box with. Okay, so funny story. In the book, there's two words that Joseph Jenkins specifically warns against using when talking about human manure systems. The first word is waste, because we talk about human waste, right? What do we do with our human waste? But it's actually like a valuable organic material, right? So we're trying to stay away from that verbiage of waste. And the other word he says to be really careful not to use is bucket. because as soon as you tell somebody that you're pooping in a bucket, and that you should try it. It's just like, it just completely, just you check out immediately, right? So he recommends using the word container. I feel like we're all adults here, and I can just, I'm going to occasionally use the word bucket. Please don't freak out. But yes, that's what we're doing. We're pooping in a 5-gallon bucket. And I would recommend, if you were going to pursue this system, just a small side note, I like the blue buckets or the green buckets, not the white buckets. You can maybe figure out why. And then toilet design, I just want to go over briefly. I've found through experimentation of different construction styles that the best way to build one of these is to have a system. You would initially think it would be better to have the door open on the front side of it, and then you push the bucket in. But the problem with that is that the bucket then can't clear above the height of the top piece. I don't know if that makes sense. So instead, you cut a hole in the top, and then you have it hinge down. And when it hinges down, the bucket then comes flush with the top surface, if that makes sense. And that just seems to work a lot better. Then, of course, you have the bucket next to it that holds the sawdust. Brief note about, how am I doing on time? Okay, brief note about sawdust. So I source my sawdust from Mountain Valley Lumber, the lumber mill across the valley. They have a mountain of it. For years, I was using just their regular sawdust. And so you always want to find like the finest particle size, because that does a better job of containing the smell. And I'll talk about smell in a minute, but so you want to find the really fine particle size sawdust. And Mountain Valley Lumber, if you're interested in doing this, you're going to need kind of a fair bit of sawdust over the course of the year. Mountain Valley Lumber will deliver you sawdust for like $100. It's like 18, you can get up to 18 yards of sawdust for $10 a yard from Mountain Valley Lumber. They just fixed their delivery trucks. They have this 18-yard dump truck, $10 a yard. It's a pretty good deal. But then my friend Bob Pedersen moved in over there. He's helping out with John's operation, and he helped John discover that he has all these streams of income that he's not really like capitalizing on. He has a giant pile of 10 plus years aged sawdust over there, mixed with some bark, but it's all super aged, and they have a shaker sifter thing, and so now they're producing this other material that is very fine particle size. That's what's in that bucket right now. So that's why it maybe looks like compost or something, but it's not. It's just dark in color, but it's really well aged sawdust is what it is. I'm really looking forward to seeing the product of that in a couple of years. And it works all the same. It's a little more expensive. It's $30 a yard, but I mean, I think it's worth it. What goes in? Pee and poop. Feminine products. Anything organic. If I cut my fingernails, I put it in there. My hair, toilet paper, wipes, if they are 100% plastic free. It's important. There's only a few brands out there that are like that. Okay. Does it smell? It does not smell at all. One of the beauties of this system is that because you're not tied into a sewer line in the floor, you could put one of these anywhere in your house. It doesn't need to be in a bathroom. It doesn't smell. The sawdust does such a good job of eliminating smell immediately. It might smell when you do your business. As soon as you cover it, it does not smell, period. And anyone who's been in my home can attest to that. Thank you. So this is actually a really key point in this system. Something that I really love about Humanure, this particular system in particular, is that you do not have to be a nerd to know how to do this. It's not like for example, there's this whole concept of like carbon to nitrogen ratios. What are we trying to achieve in the pile for optimum results? And we could talk about those things, but the reality is that both in the bucket and later when I show you what's happening in the compost piles outside, the rule of thumb is if it smells, you have not used enough carbon material. And that's it. You don't need to know about anything else. You need to keep it moist, but your nose knows. And so that's what I love so much about this system is it's not something that you have to be super educated to understand. This is available to anybody. Anyone can tell you if it smells bad, right? And also another thing that I say is like if it smells bad or if it looks gross, cover it. If you open it up and somebody didn't do a good job, or there's just too much, the pee, there's been a lot of peers in there and the pee builds up and then you have like a little puddle, just cover it up and make it look nice. And that's going to do the job. So yeah, that's a big part of it. Okay, after we switched over to the system, we pretty quickly got tired of having to explain to every visitor in our home. They'd be like, "Oh, where's the bathroom? Oh, down the hall to the left." But wait, let me give you a full briefing on how to use our system. And so we pretty quickly figured out that we needed some educational information in there, and so it just basically describes how to use the system. Obviously very simple. Also encourages people to let us know if there's a problem or if the bucket's full, we'll take care of it. And then we also have like a little info, basically the short form of this entire presentation on the wall right behind the toilet. Okay, so in our system, because my garden is set like about 100 feet plus away from the house and my piles are in the garden, I quickly figured out that I didn't want to, every time I needed to refresh my buckets or deal with a bucket exchange, that I didn't want to walk out all the way out to my compost pile and deal with it right in that second. I wanted to have an ability to like deal with it later, essentially, because it's not always convenient to like walk out to your compost pile and deal with stuff. So I built this box outside of my door, and it hinges down, so it looks like a bench when it's not open, and it holds the buckets whether they're full or empty. So if I need to swap them out, I just and it's totally fine to leave the material in the bucket for weeks. It's amazing, actually. It's already starting its process in there in the middle of winter. When I empty a bucket, might have been sitting out for a few weeks in the middle of winter. I'll go and empty it into the pile, and it will not be frozen. It's already biologically active, so there's no problem with leaving it around until you can deal with it. Again, there's no smell here. We hang out in this area of our yard all the time. There's all these buckets of poop sitting right next to us, unbeknownst to many, and nobody knows. It doesn't smell. It's not a problem. Okay, so the compost pile. I really wish I had used more emojis in this presentation because I feel like there's just a lot of great opportunities. I didn't really think it all the way through. So on the left, there's this picture of. By the way, all these black and white photos are all from the book. So these are, I'm just pulling from the book. This is one design that he promotes for the boxes. In this system, there's like a roof even that's like collecting water. They're putting it into a barrel to hydrate the piles with. The roofs could be valuable if you were in a climate that was like really wet and you were dealing with like an excess of water. You want to control the moisture of the pile. So in our situation, if it rains, thank God, and then it's a free watering for the pile. But in like tropical climates or something, you would maybe want to have a roof over it anyway. Okay, so I'm going to come over here for a second. Okay, so this part's pretty important. The construction of the pile is important. So you build the walls, and then you dig a little divot. It's kind of like a little collection divot. And then when you first build the pile, you put like 18 to 24 inches of straw in the bottom of the bin before you put any material into it. And that acts as like a biological sponge. And I'll get into the importance of that later, but essentially it prevents potential effluent from like leaking out, and also creates separation from the ground, which is important for other reasons too. And then also on the sides of the walls, I don't think the ratios aren't really well depicted here actually, because he recommends an 8-inch buffer of straw on the walls all around the pile. So the importance of that is that the straw is like insulating the pile so that the core temperature generally stays the same, and all the material is treated equally in terms of its biological activity and temperature. And then as you fill the material, as you fill up the pile with material, obviously it grows and grows. It also is like amazingly shrinking at the same time. So like, it takes us about a year to fill one of these things, and you get to the top and you think, oh, for sure it's done. But then the next time you go out there, it's so active. It's shrinking and eating it as you're going. Our boxes, let's get into it. So here's our system. It's a little hard to see. Our boxes, I've found a nice size to be about 4 feet tall, 11 feet wide, and 6 feet wide is what I've chosen for myself. You can make these things out of whatever you have. Pallets. I've made them out of pallets. I've made them out of that slab wood that comes from Mountain Valley Lumber. I've also made these little like fence grate things to keep my dog from jumping in there, but to let rain in still. And so let's go a little further. Okay, so photo on the left, this is my oldest pile. It's I'm about to carve into it and cycle it into my garden this spring. It's 2 years plus aged. It's a little hard to see in the photo. I have other photos. It is perfect compost, guys. It's perfect, beautiful compost in there. I also wanted to show you the difference. So this is 2 years, and that's 1 year old. Look at the difference. Look at how much it's digested itself. I don't know if you can see. It's shrunk almost more than half. And also something that's fun that you can do is once the pile has cooled down and it's in its curing phase, you can add worms. And worms will continue to work on it and make it even better. And then the photo on the right is the active pile that we're adding into right now, and the photo on the left is last year's, which I had just put a new covering of insulative straw. So there's always a covering of straw on top too, right? That both helps with the smell and insulating and helping the whole pile stay happy, all as like one. I love to joke when I bring people out to see these piles. I'll walk them right up to it before I really explain what's going on, and then I'll just bring to their attention that they're surrounded by like 4 years of human shit, and they would have no idea. It does not smell at all. This is a very safe system. Okay. This is 2 years old. I'll get into the age. The different coloration is due to some of the sawdust isn't fully digested yet. So the like lighter specks is actually just like the thicker sawdust particles. So it's one thing I'm pretty excited about is Mountain Valley's new product with the more aged stuff. Oh yeah, and then on the left, you see the drip line. I actually put drip line on the piles. So sometimes I'll go out there and hand water them, but I found it's really great to just run a drip line on them and let, it's really dry here. You need to keep it moist for it to be biologically active. So that's important. Okay, so this photo I took yesterday, and so it's still freezing at my place. And this is the pile that I'm actively adding into right now. It's over 90 degrees through the middle of winter, right? These piles are amazing. You'll open them up in the middle of winter and they'll be steaming. You see lots of actinomycetes clusters, all these, it's incredible the biological diversity that starts to happen right away. This pile, midsummer, will be cruising at 140, 150 all summer long. All summer long. Okay, so a little bit about the science of it. You got psychrophiles. So these are different types of microbes that thrive at different temperature levels. So you got the psychrophiles. I don't know much about those guys, but they're like 59 degrees and below. Really important. A lot of people get caught up in the importance of heat in the pile. But I want to really emphasize the importance of the mesophilic phase. So the phase in which mesophilic bacteria are thriving is super important. So there's this great graph. So you've got, the initial jump in temperature, because so our poop and pee is full of nitrogen, right? So these piles are a different story from a backyard composter, like someone who's just throwing their kitchen scraps in and their lawn clippings or whatever. Like, this is not that system. This is completely different because there's so much more nitrogen in the system present, which means more food for bacteria and fungi and more biological activity, therefore inspiring like way more heat and antagonistic action. Okay, I got 15 minutes. So, yep. Yeah. Especially like E. coli and the things that we're using, because if you're not eliminating the potential contaminants, and those are on a logarithmic scale, you want that hierarchy to kill those things off, and then everything else is a benefit, and you've got beautiful grading. Yes, and also there's actually a ton of antagonistic activity happening at the mesophilic stage that is dealing with those things as well. So while he is Yes, that's true. There's a relationship between time and temperature. Yes, that's exactly right. That's true. Okay, so the mesophiles are doing their thing. I'm going to get more into mesophiles in a minute. They are generating heat as they're increasing in biological activity. That heat crosses a threshold, which activates the thermophilic endospores. Thermophiles are heat-loving bacteria that are highly aggressive, and they thrive in hot conditions. I'll go back real quick. And then after you're through the thermophilic phase, there'll be a cooling phase and then a curing phase, in which you're back in mesophilic range. So when the thermophiles come in, the mesophiles they're dormant. They're not really doing their thing, but important activity is happening in the thermophilic stage. That's always aerobic activity too. What? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Totally. I got to cruise, you guys. Okay. So bacteria don't walk. They Food goes in, dead animals go in. I've actually buried 2 goats in this system. I'll never have goats again. Okay, so real quick, pathogen elimination. So how is this actually working? Okay, we have competition. So the food that the pathogens would be eating is otherwise being eaten by our friendly allies, right? Okay, we have inhibition and antagonism. So the friendly bacteria are actually like beating up the bad guys in there. They're straight up eating them. And then you have the heat from the thermophilic stage. A lot of these, we know the heat tolerance, the thresholds that these things can survive in and how long they can survive in. And so we know that if we hold the pile at a certain temperature, then it's going to do the job that alone on certain things. But I want to really emphasize the mesophilic stage was really important. Even if a pile isn't at a very high temperature in the 140 to 150 zone, if it's in the mesophilic range, there's actually still a lot happening there that is reducing pathogen load. A lot. That's a big part of it. A lot of people get caught up in the heat. It's not all about the heat. Some microorganisms, such as actinomycetes, actually produce their own antibiotics, which further reduces the environmental friendliness to pathogens. Important thing also is time. So even if something went wrong, here's a great example. Roundworm, major issue in some parts of the world. Roundworm has evolved with humanity. Part of its life cycle involves contact with the soil in order for it to lay its eggs or something. And so if your shit never touches the ground, then the roundworm, although it's never going to survive any of this other stuff anyway, but if it's never allowed to actually make contact with the earth and reproduce, then it's going to time out. It's not going to be able to reproduce. It's not going to survive. Okay. Different studies show the different lengths of time that we need to kill off these pathogens. 122 degrees, they're different for every pathogen, but generally speaking, 122 degrees for 4 hours. Some people are saying 140 to 158 for 3 days. My pile is holding those temperatures for months. These things aren't surviving. The book is really clear with a lot of data about the time it takes, temperatures, all the things that we could potentially deal with. I don't know if you probably can't read. I don't know. Table 11, sand dunes and poliovirus. It shows the length of time, not even in compost, just like in the soil, like in the sand. Poliovirus will survive less than 77 days. So this is a very well-researched book. It's in its 4th edition. It's been around, and it's still kicking. Okay, biodiversity matters. This is kind of me talking about just reiterating the importance of the complexity, especially of the mesophilic phase, and how important curing time is. So just letting it sit. So the book says basically, you know that it's done its thing when you can test it by, like, you could plant a seed in it and see if it grows. If a seed grows in it, that's a good sign. If the temperature of the pile is about the same temperature as the air, that is also a good sign that it is in its curing phase. So once it enters its curing phase, we let it sit for another year or two. A really important point I forgot to mention is that this is a batch system. So when you start the clock after you enter the last bucket of material into the pile. So you're not continuously adding into it and then starting the clock from, like, when you first created the pile. The clock starts when you finish, so that the whole thing has a time to do its thing. This is exactly what septic systems and municipal systems don't have the ability to do. They don't have the ability to batch their systems. So your septic system is continuously running into the groundwater without a chance for everything to be digested in its entirety, right? So that's really important. Okay, real quick, pharmaceuticals. There needs to be more research done about this, but I can tell you that from what is available, that there is a large percentage of the success of compost's ability to neutralize pharmaceutical medications, hormones, even chemicals, just like Drano or whatever. Like, compost is amazing. It is this incredible technology, and we need to not take it for granted. Our septic systems and our municipal wastewater treatment plants fully acknowledge. I talked to one of the Baca municipal guys about this issue, and he fully acknowledged they have no idea of what is, like, they're not testing for pharmaceuticals out the other end. Even if they were, they can't deal with it. There's nothing that they can do. Septic systems, not doing anything for it. Pharmaceuticals, plenty of research showing that composting processes are breaking down pharmaceuticals effectively, at least in large percentages. So even if even if human manure is an imperfect system, even if there's still something left in there, what we're doing right now is certainly not doing any better of a job, right? So that's another thing. And, like, yeah, I just think it's important to consider that, like, it might not be 100% perfect, but it sure as darn heck is a lot better than what we're currently doing. Wow, that's a lot of information. Okay, I just went into that. Okay, yeah. Okay, so another important thing. If you've gone through all this and you're still feeling queasy, I really hope you're not, but if you were, you do not have to put this stuff in your annual garden. If you're concerned about it at all, give it to your local trees, or give it to a berry bush or a fruit tree, because those things don't uptake pathogens, pharmaceuticals, or anything. So you are not committed to putting this with your lettuce. You can just give it, any tree wants this, like, it's not like you're committed to it if you're nervous about it. Okay, is it legal? We kind of went into this, but basically, right now, if you have a septic system, I gotta be. It's legal to do. I really like this. The process of composting human manure is neither disposal of waste nor production of sewage. It is the recycling of organic material. That's a personal matter. No government has the right to step in and tell you what you can do with your shit, especially if they can't prove what they're doing is any better.
You can have your compost tested at a
Yes.
prove that it's pathogen-free and basically get it certified as grade A biosolid and be like, you can't get stuff coming out of pocket sewer.
Exactly.
So, like, if it ever push came to shove, marshal the facts and all the data on your side, it's like, well, here's your law, but the law isn't actually
Right.
taking care of
And and let's take some soil samples outside of your municipal wastewater treatment system or anyone's septic system, and let's see.
oh, septic is sepsis.
Right, yeah.
Where you
It's really gnarly in there. Yeah, septic systems are gross, you guys. Like, it just hides the problem, right? That's why we all use them. Okay. And then there's this cute little illustration of a potential business idea. This guy is can we do this at a societal level? I think we can. A lot of people will come up to me, they ask, like, well, what about in cities? I'm like, we split the atom, you guys. Like, we have done so much incredible stuff. I'm pretty sure we can figure this out. Like, this is actually basic, but we're still learning as a species, right? So yeah, I think it's just a really important thing that we should all at least consider doing. Even if you're not going to jump in right away, I really suggest you read this book. The Humanure Handbook by Joseph Jenkins. It is such a valuable piece of literature. It should be right next to all your other revolutionary literature pieces. Okay, that's pretty much it. Thank you.